All right, brother. This next guest had his own WrestleMania, Lucamania, last week on Morning Combat. And I got to say that compared to the crap that we saw at WrestleMania 41, it was by far the best WrestleMania of this year. The one and only LT joins me on Submission Radio. What you going to do, LT, when Submission Radio runs wild on you, brother?
I have to tell you, I did not see WrestleMania. I'm not going to be insulting. I'm just going to say I didn't see it. But I have heard nothing but a steady stream of complaints about it. I don't think I've seen a single pro wrestling fan that was happy. Is that a fair assessment of how the world of pro wrestling feels?
I was so angry that I made a reaction video that only 4,000 people watched because it's primarily an MMA channel where I'm like, I'm going to the new Costco, but before I go there, this is bullshit, man. Like, I was fully into the fact that that was a hot load of absolute turds that got thrown in our face this weekend by the WWE. But not only by the WWE, Luke, by TKO, who is the owner of the WWE. What do you say of this notion that WWE fans are pretty pissed? They're saying some of it has to do with the TKO group making Travis Scott come out, and there's being like this big decision from higher above. And UFC fans are pissed because the card quality has been kind of shit. Is this TKO group dynamic, is it impacting on the enjoyment that we're having from both products potentially?
Let me ask a question. Is it fair to say that the ticket prices for WrestleMania were very high?
I saw a guy with a $3,000 seat. He was seated near the front, kind of. So I guess it's not too bad. I mean, yeah. Like UFC, remember like when Conor fights at MSG, it's like 50 grand to sit up the front. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, also WrestleMania is 2 days though, right? And it's the 2 days in the same venue. So like the first night's also Allegiant Stadium as well.
It is, yeah. But I think you got to buy 2 tickets from what I understand.
Well, listen, I would just say this. I mean, I don't know enough about pro wrestling to make any kind of comfortable conclusion, but I think it probably is something to pay attention to for everybody who either watches one or the other or both, to see if, and I suspect that there will be some symmetry between the strategies that they employ both on the MMA and the pro wrestling side. And then to the extent that this makes itself available, now this would be much more over the long term, and a lot of that is uncertain. But I would say on the boxing side too, I mean, I don't think TKO is getting into boxing to be, number 5 in the market. I just don't, that doesn't seem very likely. UFC is number 1 in the market. WWE is number 1 in their respective markets. I suspect that they want that. And I suspect that a lot of the same strategies about content delivery, where they go to broadcast these kinds of things, event pricing, all those kinds of things are going to have a lot of similarities between them. But I would leave the more direct comparisons to people who know enough about pro wrestling.
It's interesting as well. A ton of sponsorships now in the WWE. Before, the ring was sacred, nothing on there. Now you can squeeze another partnership on there. So there are some changes, man. And the funny thing is, Triple H, a bit of a Dana White, he's the guy that kind of runs things, Luke. Talking they do press conferences, by the way, in the WWE now, which is really funny. I wanted to go to one and be like, I saw blah 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 lost in the match. Was he transported to hospital? Like, I wanted to pretend to be like a real media member at one of those press conferences, style like, who won the fight of the night? But yeah, he was doing the whole Dana White where he's like, pro wrestling fans are just complainers. They need to like what we put out there. So because he's getting criticism now too, much like Dana White, for the product that the UFC is putting out there. So it's funny. I wonder if they catch up backstage and be like, these fucking fans, man, they just keep complaining.
I did see, well, I mean, what are they going to do? They got monopolies. It's not like you got a lot of choices, but
yeah.
I was going to say, I did see that he read Triple H. He did read Brian Campbell showed me this, that he read the gate receipts at like the post event.
Yeah.
like the same, again, this is what I mean about similarities. I mean, maybe they've always done that. I don't know. BC was saying that they hadn't, that's relatively new, but he was reading it out. Like, we set a record, like it's the same kind of thing you get from the UFC. It seems a very similar playbook.
I wonder if the UFC lawyers or the WWE lawyers are handling the lady that got crashed into by Stone Cold Steve Austin in his ATV as he was going around the ring, missed the ramp to begin with, and then crashed into the thing. And, wish he crashed into me so I didn't have to see that main event. By the way, quickly, Luke, I'm training to become a pro wrestler. You going to come watch me wrestle?
I would watch you wrestle. Yes. I mean, I would, I'm making
maybe come out with me in the corner. You can jump in with some kind of object. I don't know.
I'll bring a taser, and if anybody touches me, I'll just freeze them up. You know what I'm saying?
All right, flights are on your way. We'll see if I get BC in there too, and Long Island, Luke. All right, man, let's talk about UFC 317 just quickly, man, because I just spoke to Caio. I want to unpack that with you in a second, but what do you make of the situation that we're in right now? I know you and BC kind of broke it down a little bit. The UFC does not book per event. They look more at calendars, right? So for them, they're booking calendars. They're not really so focused. They're not like, hey, this is our WrestleMania. Although in a lot of the eyes of the fans, International Fight Week is their WrestleMania. It is their kind of Super Bowl. It is where you do the Hall of Fame ceremony and everybody flies down. You pre-book your tickets a year ahead of time. So our notion is that's the big one. To them, it's just another event in a long calendar of events. But what do you make of the notion that fans have been so disillusioned with the fact that this event doesn't have a main event yet? We've already been stung by the fact that John Jones and Aspinall still hasn't been 100% announced, even though I know there's some movement there. And this Ilia Topuria Islam fight still doesn't look like it's going to happen. Is this an additional slap? And when does it become too much for fans, do you think, where you know, this is another maybe letdown or disappointment? Does it ever get to a point where it's too much, I guess, is what I'm asking, LT.
That is only something that a fan can individually answer for themselves. About what is or isn't too much is really a function of the eye of the beholder. So it's hard for me to say. And this is the other part too. Like we were just talking about how on the WWE side, they're kind of touting what they're doing at the gate in a way that maybe they hadn't as much or in the same kind of way as before. Again, I can only repeat back what pro wrestling fans tell me. But, you know, one, they're still doing really well at the gate. And I think as long as that is the case, then they're going to continue to see exorbitant ticket prices. And I want to be clear, it's hardly UFC and WWE that are doing it. Like it's a nearly ubiquitous practice at this point. But again, you have a kind of a choice about how you want to handle that situation to situation. But the point I'm trying to make is, you know, I come on shows like this and other ones, and I just feel like I sound like a broken record. Like, you know, one of the questions that I get most commonly from fans, and it's a very good question, it's a it's the right question to ask, which is, if the other sports that I enjoy are monopolies, like, so for example, the United States, you know, the NFL or Major League Baseball, some are like actual monopolies and some are like de facto monopolies, but you know, basically they're monopolies. You know, if I get that and that's how I enjoy those sports, and we don't have any of those kinds of the problems that you seem to identify with monopoly, like what's the big deal? And the answer is, like, there are certain things to monopoly that I think are quite beneficial. You know, the most important, well, not beneficial, but like they make for easier to understand to the consumer, namely, you know, everything is under one umbrella. But there's just a host of things that go into this long term that, you know, it takes a while for some of these effects to set in, but I think you're beginning to see it. I saw Ali Abdelaziz kind of tweeting about this, saying like, you know, there's a bit of an MMA recession. You know, Bellator MMA, do you know how much they paid annually, like total fighter pay every year? I was told it was around $40 million annually. That's just $40 million that just got taken right out of the market. Nobody replaced it. One championship is kind of going away, or at least at a bare minimum, their MMA portfolio is not what it once was, I think is a fair way to put it. And PFL is certainly making an effort at it, but I don't know exactly if it's going to work. And GFL is just a fart in the wind, you know, never to be spoken of again. And I know what everybody says. They're always like, oh, well, you've got incompetent people running those promotions. And yeah, listen, there are plenty of things you could bring up to their incompetency, but like Scott Coker, you know, I got problems with some of the ways in which he promoted Bellator, but he's not incompetent. And the thing that I would always say on top of that is like, dude, you really want me to believe that Oscar De La Hoya is a fucking promotional genius? Like, what on earth are you talking about? I mean, it's just the most nonsensical thing I've ever seen in my life. And he's quite wealthy as a promoter in boxing. The reality is, if you have these market forces that go unaddressed for a long time, and in an industry where A, there's no protections for the athletes, or at least very few, and then B, this is the more important one, when you have a team situation where, you know, you have, for example, the NFL has 32 teams, they're competing for resources. There's like this attempt to always kind of like put your best foot forward to make it to the playoffs, to attract star talent, you know, all those kinds of things. And if there's trouble in the marketplace and trouble in the home with one of individual teams, the NFL can step in and do stuff. Like, there's this way in which there's this internal competition that lifts, you know, the entire thing. But that doesn't exist in these kinds of monopolies. There's no athlete protections, and there's no sort of like this, you know, federalized system inside of it. And so you don't get those same forces that lift the other leagues in the way that they do. And then, we're asking, like, where are all the stars? Where are all of the different matchups that we could get? And it's like, if you've got one firm and their proposition to consumers is we're the best at this, but also take it or leave it, over time, it's going to affect portions of the product. And I think some of what you're seeing today is some of these things that I've been trying to identify related to that.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. And like, for people that don't know, on the side, like I work for not-for-profit, and I help alleviate poverty here in Victoria through a number of fundraising things, which I enjoy doing. But one of the things that I work with is business, and I've helped build business from small franchises, all sorts of stuff. And what I know about business is, you look at trends, right? You look at the way that your customers feel about you, and it's interesting because, with the WWE, they're booking calendars, but they can book wrestlers whenever they want because outside of an injury, it's not real. So you can say John Cena's going to be somewhere a year ahead in advance. And then the NBA has been smart in the way that they've booked matchups, right? Like Christmas Day, they booked the big matchups. And they heard that fans were annoyed at too much fouls, so they removed the fouls. And then they did the three-pointer, but then there was too many so always changing the product because they feel like the consumer doesn't like something. With the UFC, it feels like people have been tuning out of MMA, right? Like the interest in MMA has kind of dwindled because of certain cards or not big fights. There's been a lot of backlash because, certain fights aren't made, certain cards are weak, certain things are expensive. But I'm just not seeing a response from them from a business perspective and trying to get the fans to a place where they're happy. Do you think this thing could go so long that eventually, the profits do start to be affected. The deals do start to be affected. We know this takes a while sometimes to be, seen on the paper at the end of the year. Do you think it gets to a point where the damage is done so much with fans that they're just basically tuning out, and then the UFC are in a bit of a rough position, especially as they're trying to renegotiate, go to another TV deal? And Netflix saying that they're not that interested in
that's not what I'm hearing. That's not what I'm hearing. They're not interested in the full catalog. That's my understanding. But that they have no interest in UFC is not how I understand it. Now, it might be a real limited amount that they pick. A handful of big ones a year, or 6 or 7, or something like that. Some kind of very modest but real investment that would be quite beneficial to them. I think what I would say is this: we're a long way from what you're describing. A long way. And I know that might seem kind of strange because, to the point that you raise, you are visibly witnessing people who might be losing interest and or have some various complaints that they are lodging against what the UFC is doing. And that's real. I see it too. But what I would say is, one, just to correct the record a little bit, I don't think that the UFC treats International Fight Week like any other event. I do think that they want that event to be as big and as grand as they can make it, within reason, obviously. It's just they're dealing with the fact that they changed their business model some years ago to deprioritize the necessity of stars. And I think some of those chickens are coming home to roost, because now they just don't have as many of them. They're not doing what they can, I think, as much as they once did. It's not like they're doing nothing. I want to be clear about that. But, relative to for example, the Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo World Tour, where are we relative to that? It seems like a pretty far cry. I would also add that this is something that no one's really brought up, and I don't have a strong theory of it. If you look at some of the newer media that's replacing older media, you can get the newer media that's got tons of stars. Sorry, what am I saying? You get newer media that can do tons of views. So, like, you're still getting a lot of views, but a lot of the coverage, such that it exists, and I know what someone's going to say. It's like, oh, here's old man yells at cloud. Quite the opposite. I make my money off YouTube and Substack. I'm hardly living off the corporate dole at this point. You know what I mean? Like, I have a job, obviously, with all the smoke, and I'm grateful for it. But, like, that is also a YouTube, property. So, to be quite clear about it. But the point I'm trying to make is, you just don't get the same kind of coverage. You don't get the same kind of investment and storytelling, and you don't get the same kind of corporate dollars introducing it to the kind of audiences that they used to reach. And I wonder if that retrenchment, to a degree, has affected it. I mean, it's sort of a smaller thing, but to get to the point that you raise, I would say that if the UFC is to suffer any consequence, it would have to mean that they just stay doing what they're doing as it stands for, I think, a lot longer before there really would be a significant problem. I think obviously some problems have emerged, but I'm going to say it again. Like, I sound like a broken record. It's a monopoly. Your choice is either them or basically nothing, unless you're a really hardcore fan and you're okay with Octagon, what's with a K, and the one in Europe, or KSW or Ryzen. And some people will be. I mean, but that's a very small number relative to the kind of people who would be entertained at the biggest audiences. Like, this is part of the problem of monopoly. They're just vastly more immune to corporate pressure from fans and their customers and their audiences. Also, like, the way in which TKO generates money, still a big portion is pay-per-view, a big portion is live gate receipts, and that involves the fans. But a growing portion is just sort of B2B business. Like, I say B2B, but it's like B2G or something, business to government, where they're just signing deals with New South Wales, the government there. They're signing deals with Saudi Arabia, UAE. Dude, like, why are they going to Azerbaijan? I mean, like, they're going to Azerbaijan before they're going to Spain. Like, how on earth does that make sense? It makes sense because I'm going to guess that Azerbaijan is just paying them to show up there. And that's the whole kit and caboodle there. And so, we're just talking about a system that is designed in significant part to be resistant to consumer backlash. And I don't know what's going to happen with their next television deal. I think it will be lucrative no matter how it ends up. Will they get the $1 billion a year or not? I don't know, but I think it will be good for them. I think it'll be a big, very enriching deal. I would say after that is where it becomes, to me, a little bit more interesting. And I won't go into detail because I know it'll just enrage half your audience. But here in the United States, there is at least, I don't know how, I'm told it doesn't weigh the same in Australia, but here in the United States, there is just an enormous, like, political turn that the organization has made. And it's hard to say exactly what that will mean long term, but I'm old enough to know that political fortunes can change significantly so over time. I wonder what alignment with one particular side in such a stark and frankly, it seems like an intentional manner will do long term for audience retention. I can just tell you that they have, certainly have ostracized a big portion of the fan base who used to watch here, that don't necessarily share those political views. It's been a very quiet exodus as a consequence. So, like, all of these factors you add in, the positive side for them is that I think that they are aware of some of these complaints. I think that they also have the resources to do better. So if they wanted to turn it up, they certainly could. I think this television deal will be great for them. I really do believe that. It's just past that, I think, is where some of the things that you're identifying could become a factor. But, the future is unknowable.
It's funny in Australia, like, we don't like politicians involved in any of our sports. And I think, like, the Prime Minister, who's kind of like our president here, showed up to a football game. We do our own football, Australia Rules Football. It draws 100 and something thousand people at some games. And he came out, I think it was a football game, and he just got booed by everyone. And everyone's like, what the hell is he doing on our screen? But yeah, I think we're more like of a UK thing of like, hey, we don't want to.
Yeah,
we don't
every politician.
And anytime anyone messes with it, it's like down
listen
the
to
train
me.
they go.
Even if I voted for the politician, if they show up to a sporting game, they should be booed mercilessly. That's just the rule of good sportsmanship. Boo the politicians. I don't care who they are.
Yeah. I just found it funny because he did a video, encouraging Alex Volkanovski going into the event, which I shared. It's kind of cool, but at the same time, they were all saying, "Oh, MMA is crap, and we shouldn't do it." And now it's like we're going into an election in a month. All of a sudden, he's doing videos supporting Alex Volkanovski. How funny. All right, let's just quickly talk about Caio versus Khamzat Chimaev. One of the fights that could potentially happen for International Fight Week, Luke. It would be great to see Khamzat back. And UNBC did an incredible job of sort of explaining why it's cool to see Khamzat back and if an interim title makes sense. I want to talk to you about it from a fight perspective. I just got done talking to Caio, and he told me, listen, the reason why it's interesting is because I've sparred with this guy for a long period of time. I wrestled with him. I've been there. I've got the rounds in with him, the reps in with him. I know his blueprint. And the reason why this is an interesting fight is because I understand the route in beating him, whereas a lot of other guys, when they get in there, that's kind of like the first time they experience Khamzat. does Caio have a point here? And does he have a path to victory because of his experience of dealing with the crazy tornado that is Khamzat Chimaev over and over and over in the training room?
There's no doubt in my mind he's correct, and there's no doubt in my mind that that experience will prove invaluable if they ever lock horns. No question in my mind. I think that there's a certain part of the way that Khamzat competes is, you know, he's got whatever he is. Every fighter has tools of the trade that they like to use. But part of what sets him apart is that there's like a shock to it when he does it, right? He tries to impose will in a very, very direct and extraordinary way. And it's from the opening, like, it's not like he doesn't take his time, not because, you know, he's got to get to his next shift out of the factory. You know what I mean? He doesn't take his time because he's trying to, like, he likes to compete that way. And that's obviously intentional about just asserting dominance, asserting will. And I think there's a certain level of comfort if you have really experienced that. And if you've really felt it, that lets you know to, like, where you can stay calm, where to be alarmed, what the routes are in terms of the progression of the attack and what he's looking for. It just gives you a bit of a roadmap to understand what you're up against in a way that I do think is actually quite helpful. I mean, the reality about Khamzat is he seems very, very talented, but there are still big questions about his game. We were supposed to get some of those answers against Rob Whittaker. And again, demolishing Rob in the way that he did was very, very impressive. But, you know, the guy did have a pre-existing injury. And it sounds like I'm discounting Khamzat. I'm not. I would favor Khamzat. I would favor Khamzat to win the title today. I mean, DDP might have something to say about that. But certainly I think you have to take him seriously as a contender. And I absolutely do. But, you know, how he performs after 3 rounds of hard labor, you know, I got some questions after the Gilbert Burns fight, and I've got some questions after the Kamaru Usman fight. I absolutely do. I don't think that they are necessarily settled. Somebody who understands how to navigate the early portion of the troubled waters really well, what he likes, you know, what are things to avoid, places that are, when you roll with someone enough, sometimes what you can find, or especially if they're better than you can find little places to, kind of hide sometimes, or stall out sometimes, or at bare minimum, just bring the action to a halt to give you a second to think out, you know, hey, how do I want to get out of this problem? What do I need to do? You know, you name it. Plus, if you can just make this guy work and they can't ever really get to a point where they're in fight ending scenarios and they're just constantly laboring, you know, when you come out of the gate like that, the benefit of it is, of course, you just put an enormous amount of pressure. A lot of guys, including very good ones, are going to fold. But people who know how to handle that are probably going to be a lot less likely to fold, and they might be able to return the favor later on. Also, Caio Borralho is young. He doesn't have as much damage on him. Like, for all of these things, like getting a feel for someone who's got an unusual game, right? Someone who might Imanari roll all the time. Somebody who's got, you know, I don't know. For example, like, you know, Mirko Cro Cop had the famous, you know, left high kick. Or no, what was it? Was it Right Leg Hospital, Left Leg Cemetery? Was that what it was? Yeah. You know what I mean? So you can train with people who've got good high kicks from either stance or whatever, but, like, you know, imagine you got to train with him and then later on you got to fight him. You would have a real keen understanding of distance, about what his setups look like, where his eyes are, all the different things that kind of matter. And that doesn't give you, you know, a free pass to win, but it does absolutely increase your chances. So I think Borralho is onto something, and, you know, that's not the fight that I necessarily want to see next, but I think down the road that could be a really interesting clash.
It's interesting that you say you don't want to see it next. If you're the UFC's position, do you hang on to Khamzat because this DDP fight is white hot and you can draw it anywhere around the world when DDP is ready? Or do you just cash in because Khamzat is very rarely ready to go? And if he is ready to go and we can get him onto a card, especially if it's UFC 317, why not just cash in right now while we know he can do it? What do you think is the right move?
I think they cash it right now, and it's for a very specific reason. One, he's missed some time because of obviously injury and illness and, you know, a number of other factors. I don't think that's really helped him. The other part too is, you know, he can get into the United States now. And that's the majority of your pay-per-view buying public. I think getting him in front of American audiences, and I know, again, your audience is predominantly Australian, but I do think, and I know he was there on that I think he did like a big tour there during the last.
He never made it. He pulled out.
No, he didn't.
No, he pulled
out. Wait. So what's the story there?
Got a phone call from the guy that was bringing him down, and he's just like, they called me last night, and they're not coming. And I had a look at Khamzat's like Instagram, and he's like somewhere in a forest doing Khamzat stuff.
Okay, I don't know what to say about that, but the point
Apparently
is,
he's coming later in the year. I don't know.
all right. He allegedly can get into the United States now, or at least he should be able to by this point. And I think it's important to get him in front of, if you're the UFC anyway, it's important to get that guy in front of American audiences to, I think, again, build somebody who speaks English, who's got a like a crazy dynamic game that the fans are, seemingly energized about. And that's something you've not been able to do for at least a little while anyway. Yeah, I think you pull that trigger on him. And by the way, if he's the guy to fight DDP, then he should win his next fight anyway. So I know that's a little bit of like, wish casting a little bit, but you get the idea that I don't think it makes sense to just continuously shelve him, put him to work.
But Bahai is the fighter. Are you thinking Imavov, or are you thinking someone else? Or
Imavov is an interesting one.
He's been very quiet, hasn't he? Imavov.
Yeah,
he hasn't really said much.
Because I think he's just waiting for that title shot to drop in his lap, and he's obviously, he did great work. You can't take that away from him.
He did, yeah.
Honestly, I mean, it's not Khamzat involved. I would rather see Bahalio versus Imavov, to be honest with you, just as like to see exactly who's going to be, you know what I mean? Like to kind of sort the contendership queue even more. But you could pull that trigger, but I just feel like Bahalio, I don't know. I think neither he nor Imavov is a giant presence in this market, but Bahalio, I think with the fighting nerds and, it'd be good for the Brazilian market too. And the Brazilian market is probably for the UFC going to be more important than the French one. They probably would go that direction over it, but yeah, I mean, if we're just saying like who's more deserving, Imavov kind of dusting off Izzy was, that doesn't get you something impressive. I don't know what does.
Yeah, it's interesting. And obviously Izzy and Strickland, that's the fight that makes sense next. So I guess we'll see what happens. Maybe Imavov will say something, or maybe he's got something cooking that we don't know about. Talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on this Ilia Topuria fight. Specifically, I know a lot of people have come down on Islam for not wanting to take this fight. Do you understand Islam's perspective on why he doesn't want Ilia Topuria, or is it something that doesn't make sense to you?
I get it. For a few reasons. One, what's going to do more for Islam's legacy if he fought Topuria next? And you might say, well, if he beats Topuria, that would add a lot to his legacy. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. No question about it. But one, Topuria is a real threat. And by no means a fucking walk in the park. Neither was Volk, certainly. But, Topuria is a different kind of threat than Volk. I know obviously Volk did amazing and got his title back and all that. I mean, he's, a credit to the game, but Topuria is a bolt of lightning. I mean, it's tough to deal with him. And even if you beat him, there's this stupid narrative that follows him, but it's a real one in the sense that it exists. Namely, all he does is beat 45ers, not just Volk, but Moicano comes up. He's a former 45er, and you'll go on down the list. It's just a Poirier, former 45er. It's just so it's like yet another 45er who moved up, and I think that doesn't meaningfully move the needle for him. By contrast, if he was able to fight Jack Della Maddalena at 170, even if he loses, it's not as disastrous as a loss to Topuria, in part because he would still keep his title. And more to the point, if he got the win, well, I mean, what's going to be better, beating Topuria or winning a title in a second weight class? I mean, you might say beating Topuria is more impressive, depending on your views of him on a fight basis. Like, it's tougher to beat that guy. But in terms of what it means for a guy like Islam, obviously it's going to mean more to win a second weight class title. And like Islam has done them a lot of favors. Like Saryukian fell out last minute. He didn't fucking flinch. He didn't flinch at all. He was like, yeah, put whoever you want me to fight, I'll choke him out, which is exactly what happened. You want me to fight Volkanovski in his hometown? I'll do it. You want me to do it again? Granted, I know that Volk was coming off the couch, but it was still short notice in terms of the change of opponent for Islam. He's like, I'll do that shit too. You know what I mean? I'll do it. So like, and this is the number one pound for pound fighter in the sport. Like, I think a lot of fans should understand, it's like, you want me to take on potentially a tougher challenge with less upside than, going up a weight class and like the ways in which that could be enriching to his legacy, like why wouldn't he pick something like that? Why wouldn't he wait to see what's happening with UFC 315? So listen, I think that I will just tell you what's a fight that I would rather see. What's a fight that you would rather see? Probably, I'm going to guess, is Makhachev Topuria. And for that reason, there is still a decent chance that they'll make it or it'll end up happening this year at some point. Don't know about International Fight Week. I guess we'll see. But, you know, your question was not so much like, what did I want to see or what did you want to see? But like, do I understand Islam's position? Yeah, I very much understand Islam's position.
And it's interesting as well to see Khabib talk to it because he's kind of like the leader of the team, right? So if he's saying it, you can kind of guess that, you know, that kind of travels all the way through. They run kind of like a team more than an individual. And I guess they are missing that Conor McGregor Khabib sort of thing where it's like, this is the big rivalry that can maybe even catapult Islam out there. But at the same time, they do have their own points, which makes sense in the stuff that you mentioned. If we never see Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev, where does that rank for you in the fights, in the biggest fights never made in the UFC?
That is tougher to say. It would certainly make a list. I don't know how high it would be. The reason I'm saying that is because I have a feeling that Topuria is going to end up being something even more special than he already is. I have a very strong feeling that he will be that. But like as it stands today, he's certainly quite special. But you know, he's got one title defense with one title in one division. Like there's still a lot left to go for him to do something special. And so, you know, it's like, did they not make this fight now? I mean, how will that, if they're not did they not make it, if it doesn't end up happening, how will that decision to not force it or whatever age? All right, it might age poorly, but like when I think of fights that got away, I think of Fedor versus Brock, right? I think of, you know, potentially a Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm 2, or, you know, Couture versus Fedor, or, you know, stuff like that. That's kind of where my head is at. Islam versus Topuria would be highly coveted. It sounds like I'm poo-pooing it. I promise I'm not. But when I think about fights that got away, Silva GSP is like a fight that got away.
Yeah,
right?
huge.
Again, what's the difference? They were both champions at the time that they wanted to make it. And they ended up doing something like that. They got Penn versus GSP. Penn nearly beat him the first time. GSP kind of got away just at the, you know, by the skin of his teeth late in that one. And then he obviously wiped the floor with him in the second one. That was a champ fight because both were champs at the same time. So you did get that one, which was great. But, you know, we're not, this is, I don't know, this feels a little different to me. It would certainly be tragic if it never happens, but I don't know how that fits in on other cases where guys were already monster figures and fixtures of the fight game when these fights were available. To me, it feels like Topuria is still ascending, you know?
You say you feel like Topuria is going to be even more special. What do you mean? What are you feeling?
I would be very surprised if he doesn't become a champ, or, you know, or sorry, you know, I don't know if he'll hold both at the same time. That seems out of reach, but I'd be very surprised if he doesn't win a title at 55. Can't guarantee it. You know, the future is hard to predict, but he's as good as people realize he is. I think he's even better than that. I think he's still getting better. And I think that he's going to be a one-man demolition party at the top of this division for a little while. The only part that's hard to know about that is how long he wants to stick around and do this. I don't know how to answer that, but I think that, you know, we were all waiting for like the Ismagulovs and the Kutateladzes to take over. Well, we were right that some of them might have been Georgian. We just didn't know it was going to be, you know, via Spain that there was this takeover, and also at 45 to 55 that there was this kind of takeover. But I tend to think that's what might happen.
Hey, you forgot to mention Chandler McGregor on the greatest fights that never happened. What's your reaction to McGregor still calling out Chandler? Just, I think yesterday, tweeted it out.
Yeah, who cares?
You think we see it? And do you think anyone even wants to see that?
People will pay to see it. People pay to see almost anything. It might do okay at the box office. I can't say that it would be some kind of bomb or something, but I mean, he'll be 37. McGregor will in July. God only knows what physical state he's in. I mean, I couldn't even possibly tell you. Chandler has had a good career. I know people are kind of beating up on him because obviously went south against Patty, and he did look bad against Patty. I mean, you just have to admit that.
Yeah.
So, you know, he is, I don't know if I'm ready to declare he's washed, but he is very much towards the end of his career. You know, will people pay for that? Sure. Some people will pay for that. If you want to see it, it might happen. But like, what's my level of enthusiasm for that is, you know, approximately 0.00 repeating.
You think McGregor ever returns?
So what's interesting is, right in the aftermath of the jury in the civil trial awarding for Nikita Hand, and then there was really no fallout here in the United States really at all. I don't know how
he's trying to run for president in Ireland.
Yeah, well, he's despised in Ireland, as I understand it. My understanding is the Irish cannot stand him. I don't know if this kind of turn he's making will fix his fortunes, but this is the point I wanted to make. Once that jury came to that decision, you noticed in the aftermath in Ireland itself, a bunch of businesses cut ties with him, including his liquor business. Right now, I think he owns like the Black Forge Stout or whatever, but all of the stuff related to Proper 12, they all cut ties with him. And my initial thought was, man, that was probably like a lot of money he was making just as like a brand ambassador month to month, like all that cash rolling in. And he's not like he's got cash rolling in from fighting, like all that's, you know, he still has the money, I'm sure, but it's not like actively coming in, right? So I thought, well, that might hasten his return to the octagon. And like in theory, that sounds like it still could, especially now that he's got like fewer ways to make money. But I think he's just so knee deep into whatever lifestyle he's living. And, you know, maybe when this effort becoming president peters out, there might be some, you know, I mean, like he's been living a different, I've said this on your show before, he's been living a different life for a really long time. And I think that is still true. You just have to ask yourself, at what point does that become all encompassing to the point where a return isn't even possible anymore? I don't know if we've reached it, but I feel like we're getting pretty close, you know. He can come back at 38, but like, or 39 even, but dude, he'll get fucking smoked by whoever is there. So I when that decision first came down and all those businesses cut ties with him, I was like, oh, he'll definitely be back. Now I'm like, I guess we'll see, man. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, he also had the crypto coin as well. That crashed too. So things aren't working out.
Yeah. And his stock.
I just see him boxing at like 60. I feel like when he peters out of the UFC system, you know, he's just going to start doing like exhibition bouts, trying to do as much.
Yeah, which by the way is,
you know, he's 60, you know, probably against Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, like, and by the way, like
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, like that, you know, there's definitely going to be a market for that, I think. But
can you imagine you and me covering that? That we're going to be like 60 ourselves or whatever, right? Like it would be 70 covering that.
God help me if I'm doing that at 60.
I'll be like, Luke, can you go on the show? You're like, I can't see the screen.
If I'm covering fights like that at 60, you have permission to put a bullet in the back of my skull. Okay. That's a little morbid, but you know, metaphorically.
Hey, you said it on the show, so legally now that's binding.
Oh, great. Now there's a bounty on my head. Awesome.
Someone buy me a ticket. No, I'm kidding. I would never hurt you, Luke. You would kill me in 2 seconds just with a bad look. Guys, that is us for today. As we wrap up, I just want to bring up your Substack, Luke. I love it, man. I'm obviously joined up. I'm a big fan of yours. What I love about it is there's all sorts of stuff for people that haven't checked it out. You do a bunch of videos. I guess a lot of people don't really even maybe know what a Substack is, but it's a way to connect with you, what you're doing, what's happening. You do little things, even like what you're reading, what you're watching, what you're digging, which is actually really interesting to me as well. Give me a breakdown. What is coming up on the Substack? What are some things that people can get amongst of, and what's some of the content that they could check out?
Yeah, it's you can follow me on Substack. It's L Thomas, just the letter L Thomas, lthomas.substack.com.
It'll be down here in the description, of course.
Okay, awesome. I got to get a better URL for that, but
L Thomas.
I know, but they recommended I go with my name, and I was like, okay, all right.
I like LT69 or Bang Bang Luke, but I don't know.
Yeah, bootyeater69.com. I'm sure it'll come right up on all the searches. I would say, okay, so it's very, very easy to explain. Think of it this way. I am on YouTube. I have my own YouTube channel. Again, I do Morning Combat. It's on YouTube. I love YouTube. YouTube is phenomenal. This is on YouTube. I have no complaints about YouTube other than to say it's got some of the same constraints that every other platform does, which is that if you don't feed the algorithm the way which it asks you to feed the algorithm, your content just can't quite do as good. And I'm happy to play that game to an extent, certainly. But what I was hoping for was a place that I could, kind of get off the algorithmic treadmill and just do content that I want to do, whether or not, I'm not trying to necessarily reach a mass audience with that. I'm just trying to do content that I love. That's part of it. And the other part too is, MMA is been my life for a long time, man, a long time. Not just covering it, but first time I watched it was the summer of '94. Like it's been a long time for me.
Yeah.
So
5 years after I was born.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? Like it's just crazy how long I've been watching NHB and then, and now MMA.
Yeah.
But, I have other interests in my life. I have other things that I care about. I have other things that are important to me. And I want a place where I can take those and use it. And I don't think my YouTube channel is like, some people just want my MMA coverage or whatever, and that's it. They don't want anything else. Fine. I don't have the slightest problem with that. But for people that want a little bit more, Substack will give it to you.
Love it, man. How many members do you have at the moment?
Let's see. I've got 3,000 and some change.
God damn, Luke.
Yeah.
Maybe keep that username. There he is, Luke Thomas. Of course, Morning Combat as well. One half of the greatest show out there with BC and Long Island. Luke, appreciate you joining me, man. Can't wait to see what happens next in this crazy world of MMA.
Anytime.